Recently, I made a Reddit post asking for the community's best tips on improving and ranking up. I asked for their rank, hours in the game, what their tip was and how that tip helped them climb. To my surprise, I got responses from the entire ranked spectrum, all the way down in Iron and all the way up to Immortal/Radiant. So whether you're a bronze player trying to get into silver, gold and get better at the fundamentals, or you're an Immortal player trying to peak into Radiant, you should be able to find something that can help you out. The first tip comes from all the way down into Iron 1, where a Blazer Mega, not to be confused with a Mega Blazer, mentions the importance of staying calm and trying to not have too high of DPI. Albeit very noob-friendly advice, it's very important. Staying calm under pressure is a skill and not something that's very easy to learn. It takes time and comes from a lot of experience and the right mindset. So if I were to give you guys one thing to focus on when trying to stay calm in the more hectic moments, I'd say to focus on what you can affect. Play around your teammates without thinking about what mistakes they're currently doing, and instead put your attention on your current task at hand, whether that's anchoring on A or dealing with rotations through mid, for example. And as for the second part of the tip, it's very important to find the sensitivity that fits you. The lower you go, the more fine control you will get with your aim, but you want to be able to rather easily do a 180 when you're in a clutch or retaking. A great way to figure it out is to hop into the practice tool, shoot some bullets into the wall, and then run around while keeping your crosshair stuck onto the bullet holes you just created. If you're constantly falling behind, your sensitivity will probably be too low, but if you're instead over-aiming, it will be too high. You should mess around with this a little bit until you seem to find something that feels right for you. Once you've gotten used to following bullet holes, you can hop over to the bots instead, connect your crosshair to their head, run around a bit and do a counter strafe to stop your momentum, shoot the bot and then continue to the next one. This way you can turn that test into a way to practice counter strafing for your actual games. Tip number 2 comes from a Justains47 in gold, and he states that he's flipping dog poop and click their heads. What? So the real tip number 2 comes from a anime addict, please tell me that he means anime, and he pushes for improving Gamesense, especially by watching pro games or analyses. Together with Gamesense, he recommends learning mechanics and strategy, which, if you play with or as a team, I strongly recommend. Playing against a team which helps each other out, executes correctly and makes the right calls will be some of the most frustrating Valorant you'll ever play. Though, sadly, practicing and executing complex strategies will be very difficult unless you're 4 to 5 people queuing up. If you're instead playing solo or with a friend, especially in low to medium ranks, I would recommend to mainly focus on the game sense aspect of the tip, as it's what you will be able to actually use in the game. Teamwork is one of the most overpowered tools to use for winning games, but sadly it's the one you can't really affect yourself. You can be a great team player, but sadly end up with a team that just won't cooperate. Instead, try to focus on timings, reading your opponents, learn when to try to flank and when to instead fall back, as this will help you much more in improving as an individual player. Learning these things does come mostly by experience, as you need to become almost unconsciously aware of what's going on in each round, but it can help to watch both pro games and demos of your own games. But if you are insisting on getting some game theory homework, then I would personally recommend practicing lineups, post-plan scenarios, and other areas which you can practice and use by yourself in any game. Our third tip comes from a Navi3702, currently residing in Diamond 3. He decided to move away a little bit from the more typical practice this or that tip, as he mentions the harsh truth of team composition. Once you get to the point where all 10 players in the game know what they're doing with decent mechanical skill and game sense, it's time to start figuring out how to counter common plays and focusing on creating favorable duels. Make sure that your team has the smokes to block vision, ways to clear out corners without putting your own life at risk, utility to stop rushes, and even preferably a way to keep flankers at bay when attacking a site. Blocking vision and splitting up the site so that you can choose which areas to fight for will probably be the most important part of any composition, as otherwise there will simply be too many places to look at when entering the site. And after that comes the initiation. Whether it's a Skye checking out the site with her wolf, or a Sova using his arrow and drone to figure out what's going on, You will need something to help out with first contact. Even if your opponents shoot the utility before you see anyone, you should at least hear where the shots come from. And after that, you can use the Viper Poison or a Brimstone Mollo to clear out the area, force the defenders into the open, and kill him. Similar logics will work for defending, as if you have no way of blocking vision or controlling an area through AoE, there's a very high risk of simply being overrun if the opponents decide to push as a group. So if you're currently stuck bouncing up and down in the same rank, even though you feel like you're performing well enough to rank up, it could be very helpful to improve your champion pool to further help the rest of your teammates. It is, after all, a team-based, tactical shooter. For the final, and may I say best tip, we have Hacks, explaining why you're missing out on so many kills. Now, I could probably make an entire video itself on only crosshair placement, because it's such a big thing, and there is so much that goes into it. But yet at the same time, it is one of the simplest tips there are, and probably the easiest for you to implement out of the ones I've just gone through. In theory, all you have to do is to hold your crosshair at head level, where your opponents are supposed to appear, and then once they do, you shoot. So then, as Hacks says, if you have to do a crazy flick to get the kills, you're actually most of the times doing something wrong, even if you hit the shot. I mean, congrats on hitting a nasty flick, it does look great, but why did you set yourself up in that situation to begin with, when you could a lot of the time just play the right angle, wait, and left click? This does actually go quite hand in hand with Hanime's earlier tip in the video about Gamesense, because if you have zero clue where your opponents are going to appear, it's much tougher to hold the right angle, even if your crosshair placement is technically correct. Now, I'm sure you're sitting there going, but how can I hold the right angle as an attacker when I'm the one pushing in and the opponents could be on any weird little box on the site? Well, Hacks got you covered there as well. In a further discussion in the comments, he mentioned seeing attackers completely ignoring the correct way of attacking a site. Instead of clearing corners and angles one by one, or just jiggle peeking for information, they simply swing straight out into the open and die from an earlier angle. And this, my friends, you would avoid if you had the correct crosshair placement as an attacker. By first jiggling the site for information, you can figure out where they're playing without giving them a big window to kill you. Then, once you either know where they are, or where they are not, you proceed with clearing the more common angles one by one. And this is the part where the crosshair placement plays a role. Pre-aim the angle you're going to engage through the wall before you walk out. Then use A or D to move out to make counter-strafing as easy as possible, and then simply click. Voila! You've learned how to pre-fire corners. A perfect execution of this will have you clear a site without ever flicking against anyone. All of these tips, except maybe the one from Chastain's, will prove extremely useful if you're not already mastering them. And even if you are mastering one or two, once you start combining them, you will notice a real burst into both skill and wins. By correctly clearing a site, taking the angles one by one, using the help of your initiator's abilities, you can set up a great post-plant scenario where with the right read of your opponents, you can simply hold an angle and shoot. With some good controlling agents on top of that, you might even stop your opponents from attempting the retake at all, which will give your duelist a chance to instead hunt them down to prevent them from saving. So that was all that Reddit had to give you folks this time. Which tip do you think will help you the most? Or do you feel like you're already doing all of them? Let me know in the comments down below. And then, as always, thank you guys for watching. Remember to like and subscribe for more help on how to improve in Valorant. And, as always, keep dabbing.